we'll be starting off with the Heatdome scenario. And so I know that all of us have come from very different backgrounds and places, but for a moment, we're just going to step out from reality and try to enter into the mind of a rural community in central BC called Cedar Grove. And so welcome to Cedar Grove, everybody. You've all gained citizenship there. And now Cedar Grove is about 300 kilometers from what is Prince George. That's like the closest large healthcare center. The main industries include forestry and agriculture, some tourism, and it's a community of about 5,000 people, with the majority who are elderly and or transient and seasonal workers who help with the different trades there. And then in terms of a healthcare perspective, our community has 4 full-time doctors and some limited social services. There are volunteer-run ambulance and fire stations. The hospital has 8 acute beds, a small operating room, and a long-term care wing. And to get to Cedar Grove, there's only one main highway that's open year-round. The community also has history with heat waves and dealing with climate emergencies. And so back in 2021, when we had the heat dome hit southern central interior BC, we had also lost 3 community members because of the heat. So that's a little bit about the background of where we are together.
Okay, so June 15th, 2025, coincidentally tomorrow, hot temperatures incoming, temperatures expected to reach 42 degrees centigrade. We're all set at 37. That's our core temperature. And when it's 42 outside during the daytime high, it's tough. It's also tough at night because it doesn't cool down enough at night. So this is a tough situation. I'm sure that most of you remember not so long ago when we had exactly this kind of a warning on the news. It was only 40 degrees then, but that's exactly what happened. So we've got this warning, and we are a group of concerned citizens in Cedar Grove. We've been called together by the leadership of the community, by the mayor, and by a council, and we're attempting to make a plan. We're, of course, part of a health authority and part of a province, and we have every faith in the resources of those agencies. But based on our experience in 2021, we think we should probably put a little bit of effort in ourselves to try and protect our vulnerable people, to try and do whatever we need to do. So we've been called to a meeting to plan. And the meeting is really a brainstorming session, and every one of us has a stake in proposing actions. What are your priority action areas? What should we be doing? How can we mobilize the resources at our disposal? And how can we mitigate potential health threats so we don't lose anybody? The context for this discussion and this workshop scenario that we have worked through together is real. The discussion we had was really an interesting one because we had a scenario to deal with and think about that actually people in the room had a lot of experience with, like they already knew. And I'm going to call on Spencer from our room to just give us an insight into what their thoughts were about the discussion.
Yeah, so we talked about what actions need to be taken, who the players are, lived experience, and how we move forward on those things. We talked about the economy and working with what are we gonna do about supporting unhoused seniors and whatnot, and we even got into a discussion right at the end about what the role the federal government should be playing in supporting communities in emergencies.
One of the ideas that kind of came back was that we had the solution to a lot of these things before. Like we actually historically had traditions that answered some of these questions. And Spencer, just describe your grandparents' house and how it was cool, because that was kind of interesting, I think.
We were talking about building codes and whatnot, but if you look back, and especially at our grandparents, they knew how to keep their homes cool, right? I mean, I can still do it today because my grandmother taught me. You open your windows at night and you close all your blinds during the daytime, but we built our houses with that in mind. But you can't do that with modern homes because they're not built that way. They're built to be air conditioned and they're maintained through electricity, and we have to consider that we might not not have electricity in a heat dome. One of the things we're looking at right now is our power company turning off the power during some of these times that are actually going to be events for us.
We definitely raised the same concerns about power. Again, recent announcements by utility companies which don't make a lot of sense. So that is part of the challenge, and the ability to go back to the basics and having those understandings, plans and knowledge is critical to informing that network of communities. Often within rural BC, it's not just one community, there's numerous satellite communities in proximity. So making sure that that communication piece is in play well ahead of any event.
We did end up talking about the communication issue as well and how to get trusted communication, because that's a big thing we're seeing with the disinformation campaigns and all this conspiracy nonsense. David, I believe it was. Can you tell them what happened with your news group there?
Yeah, like when I think about our whole discussion, the core of it was the importance of community trust, trusted communication sources. Unfortunately, what we discovered in Yellowknife actually aren't the government. They tend not to be the feds. They tend not to be our municipal leaders, unfortunately. And it ended up being an independent news source here called Cabin Radio, which is like our little independent newspaper. They go from an average number of hits on their website to something like 15,000 a day, which is not bad for an independent newspaper, to over 1 million a day during the evacuation. It became the main area of trusted news, even though for the most part they were just saying exactly what all of our leaders were saying. Everybody went to this independent source, Cabin Radio. And so in these kinds of emergencies, those types of sources, in our experience, became utterly critical. And Cabin Radio won a national newspaper award because of it.
Yeah, I think we got to get locals more involved, and that's a great way.
It just brings to mind a very personal story about our community. We had a flood in the fall of 2021. The event kind of happened through the night, so we had a whole bunch of social media posts, pictures of the flood coming through town and people on their roofs. And our only radio station has become CBC, so centralized outside of the community. And on CBC in the morning news came the announcement that there's been some flooding, 4 or 5 homes in the Tulameen area that are underwater. And the reality was 1/3 of our community was underwater, and that wasn't reflected in this news announcement. But that morning, then I phoned the CBC radio to say to the host, our community's underwater. And the response back from the host was, well, I can't take your word on it. I need an expert. So even though CBC is a reliable source, the information wasn't connecting to CBC because it was coming through a manager of the regional district. That manager was centralized. The communication wasn't happening between the municipality and the regional district because of the centralization. So again, it's great that we have a centralized radio station, but as a community member, I feel I'm an expert, and we have to convey to the outside world that people with lived experience and knowledge are really the ones that we need to listen to.
Yeah, interesting, the conversation around communication, because if you ever watch an emergency unfold on TV, you almost never see the elected officials. It's because we have communications people, and almost everything is supposed to go through communications people. I'm the communications person for my community. If you look back at 2021, I was on every newscast that I could possibly get on because of that exact thing. I did not want the wrong information being spread about what was going on in the community. I needed a community face to be that voice for the community. That was key, and that brought trust to the situation. Whereas if you look at my regional district, and there's no offense to my regional district, we have a communications manager, and he puts it all together like a little TV show, and he broadcasts this out. And now he's bringing in all these people that are experts in their field with no local face to the conversation. And it's important that our leaders understand that their role is to be the face of this, because we're the ones that speak for the people, and you need to push your elected officials to actually represent your community in the time of need like this.
One of the things we noticed in Yellowknife was our emergency group, our municipal and territorial governments, had a hard time breaking out of this worry about making their community panic and understanding that what we were facing in the Northwest Territories was beyond anything that they had ever planned before. I think our evacuation was probably called late in a couple of cases because of the pressure that I think municipality governments feel that, like, wow, like thinking the unthinkable and how hard that is. What happened in the Northwest Territories, and I can only comment because I'm kind of guessing, but I think it was actually the military that came in and basically said, if you don't call an evacuation, we will. Decisions around evacuations or other things, that they're made in a timely manner and early, even though they're hard decisions to make.
Great comments. It seems like a communication, trust, leadership, being up to date, being more flexible, more agile is really an important way for communities to be able to respond. And we've inherited so much baggage in terms of our structures and our history that doesn't really work very well for rural communities in many cases. And how do we kind of shed some of that and move forward in ways that make sense? There's almost the centralization has really created a dependency, and that pattern of dependency doesn't really work very well in the face of these kinds of challenges. It's really in times of crisis that people come together, that the best of people comes out when the community is facing a real challenge. I think that's true for many of the scenarios that we're talking about.